So Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
This Shabbat is Shabbat Bo, and it's it's a special Shabbat because it talks about the end of the struggle of the 10 plagues and we talk about the last three plagues, but but there are deep teaching here, very, very important teachings here about how to get rid of or how to kind of throw away any oppression. So it's not just the story of leaving Egypt and the end of the plagues, but today we'll look at the mechanism of how you throw off from yourself any uh, oppression, but also things that the word Egypt in Hebrew means narrow. So anything that narrows on your life, anything that you may even oppress yourself. So anything that kind of pressures you. Now, of course, we also live in a reality today that we face anti-Semitism everywhere, and really this story of Pharaoh, especially Pharaoh, which is the just the last the this is the third parasha of the book of Exodus. So just the story of Pharaoh himself is the root of anti-Semitism. And how so? The rabbis tell us that what happened in Egypt with Pharaoh is actually the foreshadowing of every event that oppresses the Jewish people. So before we even get to the text, last week we talked about how the Egyptians were afraid of the Israelites, and they started, of course, enslaving them. But if you remember, the it wasn't overnight, and that's the most important thing about remembering about these processes. That first of all, it's a process, but it's a slow process a lot of time. And we normalize certain realities little by little. So just in the last, what, month, we've heard of at least 4 or 5 synagogues that were either burnt down, were graffiti. Something happened for synagogues. So of course it always the attacking the symbols, and we'll look at that too. But we have kind of started normalizing. We're not out in the streets. The Jews are not going out now into the streets demonstrating against anti-Semitism. I don't know why, because we somehow normalize the fact that, okay, we're Jews. It just happens a little bit at a time, and we can tolerate it. And this is exactly what happened in ancient Egypt. Nothing is new in that sense. The word hard work, parech, the rabbis break it to two words, perach, a soft mouth, that it happens over time with soft mouth. It's just restricting one day at a time Jews from going certain places, working in some professions. It's okay that they pay more taxes, and of course, we know that in the Jewish history, that Jews often had to pay more taxes. They had to be restricted in many ways or dress differently, and this is how it worked in Egypt. The flip side of it, if you can think of any flip side to anti-Semitism, the Talmud tells us that the Israelites were saved from Egypt because God saw that they kept their identity. and their identity especially was in the area of dress, names, and language. So the Israelites kept their language, they kept their names, and they kept their dress. So these are the three simanim, as we say, signs that Jews are still visible. So most of the Jews that are attacked, of course, on the street, if not all, are visibly Jewish, of course, right? So that's one thing. That's why synagogues are being attacked, because they're there, they're visible, and they can be attacked. But that really is the flip side of it too, because they attack us because of our symbols, but we kept our symbols and therefore we were saved. So it's a double-edged sword, or a coin with two sides, that it almost, when people attack us, there are two reactions, of course, and throughout Jewish history there were two reactions to anti-Semitism. Some say, then it's not worth being visibly Jewish, and I'll just be Jewish at home, and then not visibly Jewish out when I go out. That was that was in the Reformation in Europe, starting the 1700, with the Haskalah, with the Enlightenment. That's how they did it. They said, we will be home, we will be Jewish at home, but a citizen outside. I'm not passing any judgment. I'm just saying this was the reality. And then on the other hand, there were those who, as a reaction to anti-Semitism, but also internal reaction to the Reformation within Judaism, and that's Hasidut, went the other way and said, actually, we'll continue, and we'll actually even add restrictions on ourselves to keep our identity even further. And we will even, so to speak, ghettoize ourselves and stay away from those influences. So that's why actually European Jews have these two sides of very secular and very religious. Sephardi Jews and Middle Eastern Jews don't have that really, because one, there was no such thing as secular in Arab lands and Muslim lands. It's either you were Jewish, Christian, Muslim, but there was no such thing as not having a religion. And then on the other hand, there were no persecutions based on necessarily there was no internal friction that way, because there was no secularization. So nobody had to react to the secularization within. So a lot of times you can see that in Israel too. I grew up with kids in my class that were Ashkenazi, that either when their family was either ultra Orthodox and they had no contact with them because they were secular, or vice versa, they were religious and they had a secular family. We really didn't have that. People, even secular Sephardi, Mizrahi Jews, always are in touch with their families. There is no schism of anti-religion. You may not be observant yourself, but there's no anti-reaction to religion. I'm just saying that to lay the kind of the framework that we're talking about, because at the end of this parasha, when well, it's going to be next time, but the beginning this parasha, when Jews, there will be Jews who, the Talmud tells us that they died in Egypt. It's a misconception that all Jews left Egypt. Actually, what it's telling us that only 20% left Egypt, and some say even less than 20%. The word that they're talking about is the chamushim. They came out chamushim, and the word chamesh, five or fifth from that came out. So in this week's parasha, we talk about the three last plagues that actually all have to do with darkness. I don't know if that's the reason that the rabbis divided the the 10 plagues between last Shabbat and this parasha. I'm not sure. Actually, there are different explanations why they did it, but maybe this was also one of the reasons, because it's very clear that the 10 plagues are a progress from the most from the most bottom, from the water. Starts with water, it goes to frogs that live in the water that go into the land, and then lice is the land, and they go into the animals and further up and up until they get to, in our parasha, to the locust, darkness, and the plague of the firstborn. So these are the three, but they are actually, even though the middle one is called darkness, but already in the plague of locust, there's a language in the Torah that says that it covered the eye of the land. So already there's this idea of darkness, or something that restricts the vision, and then darkness, and then the plague, of course, of the firstborn, which is total darkness, and it happened in the middle of the night, in the middle of the darkness. And just to kind of complete this idea and connect it to reaction to anti-Semitism and forces that oppress and narrows on the Jewish people, is that the idea of darkness means that those who died in the darkness, those that the Talmud tells us that 80% died in the darkness, and these are the people who were not willing or able to put the blood on the doorpost, so the angel of death will pass over them. It was about the spiritual vision, that they could not see beyond the dark times, so they gave up. Those Jews that gave up on being Jewish, visibly Jewish first, they stayed Jewish at home, but then if you give up one of them, at the end, the other part will be lost too. That's just history proves it. So like that was Mendelssohn's, actually. Mendelssohn's philosophy will be Jewish at home and citizen outside, and then none of his grandchildren and then progeny stayed Jewish. So that darkness is what we're talking about today, is how to see through the times of oppression, times of anti-Semitism, to look at the mechanism of it and then live through it. Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and I think this is very relevant. Joseph, when he went to Egypt, did a tremendous amount of good. He saved Egypt because of the plagues. He had them all prepared. They were the only ones that were prepared. And he ended up, for he and his family, with some of the best land in Egypt. And they grew and they multiplied. And what did advisors start saying? They are getting too strong. If we have an enemy, that enemy can join up with all the Jews we have living here, and they'll wipe us out. What's the motivation for turning them into slaves? Fear. Now you look at today, Jews don't even make a rounding error in the population of the earth. We have like what, 8+ billion people on the planet, and what are there, something like 15 million Jews? It's like nothing. It's non-existent. But Jews are in the news all the time. Jews are involved in government and medicine and this. Who wins the Nobel Prizes? Jews. Then you look at Israel. What was Israel? Rocks and desert. If you went to Israel before 1948 and you looked at it, wouldn't have been your prime choice for land. And the Jews came in
Right.
and they turned it into a paradise where their leaders in technology and in medicine and on and on and on. So what does this do? The rest of the world, so the Jews, if we're not careful, they're going to take over. We're going to be their slaves.
Hmm.
And fear, fear is, I think, the major cause of anti-Semitism. How
Yes.
you combat that, I don't know.
So we'll try to find out.
Well, instead of like not wearing a kippah in public, we need to act stupid.
Well, so thank
Not
you
going to
for that.
happen.
Thank you for that, because absolutely, that's how the anti-Semitism started in Egypt when Pharaoh said they're too strong, they're taking over. That's always the beginning. Let's figure out a solution, and then little by little it becomes then it finally becomes the final solution.
Even the
So
Jewish bankers in the Middle Ages was the same kind of things. The royalty would go to the Jews to borrow money to fight their wars, and uh-oh, the Jews want their money back. Let's kick them out of the country.
right. So okay. So in the framework that we're talking about, we're already into the fear. The Egyptians already bought in to the idea of enslaving the Israelites. We're now kind of trying to get out of it. We're on the downslope, so to speak, of that whole episode of Jews being slaves. Um, as a parenthetical idea, it's good to remind ourselves also that the slavery, again, it shouldn't have gone into killing the Jews and doing what the Egyptians did, but the idea of oppression was already there built in when God prophesied to Abraham that his children are going to be in a foreign land enslaved for 400 years. The reason is that, so whether we know the reason or not, it's already built in. So we have to understand that there was also an important part of our education, our makeup, to be in this kind of situation. And of course, the Torah tells us many, many, many times after why we needed to go through this. So, what I'm trying to say that even through darkness, right, we're building, so to speak, character, right? So it's part of our program. Of course, the nations and in Egypt they crossed the line. They weren't supposed to do certain things like throwing the babies to the Nile or enslaving the Israelites to the point where they had no breath. That was never part of the program, and that's why the Talmud says God intervened earlier to take the people out. But the Torah tells us many times throughout why we needed to do this, and that's actually the point of the Jewish people. The rabbis tell us, and the Torah tells us that the point of the meaning of the Jewish people is to constantly leave Egypt. That is our role in this world, to leave Egypt ourselves and to show the world how to leave Egypt. And how do you leave Egypt? I said it, I try to give this image anytime I can, but it's to flip the the Egyptian pyramid. The Egyptian pyramid says there's one person at the top and everybody is a slave. And the more vulnerable you are, the better for us because we can take you as and enslave you, just easier. We flipped it. Moses is the pivotal character that says, from now, we will be taking care of the weak and the vulnerable. The leader in the Jewish context, and I would say in the Judeo-Christian, we definitely live in a society that is Judeo-Christian and that got their values from the Torah, from Judaism, of course. And that meant that we take care of the poor, the weak, the orphan, and so forth. Anybody who is actually weak becomes our first priority. So they are the top, and the leader is in the bottom. So in a sense, it's the Star of David. If you want to attribute this meaning to it, it's not necessarily the original meaning of the Star of David, but it has those two pyramids that we have triangles that we keep having to flip. And justice that you pursue is a constant process. So there's two elements to that, of course, internal and external. So the external, how do we react to the external? We mentioned there's those who decide to give up and those who decide to hold on. The ratio is actually true even today. The Orthodox Jews in Judaism today represent about 10% of all the people who are view themselves as Jewish, which means that they are visibly Jewish because they wear yarmulkes on a regular basis, or tzitzit, or whatever that identifies them as Jews. They keep the Sabbath, they keep kosher, and certain things that are in the orthodoxy of Judaism. Okay, so it may not be a pleasant idea, but most Jews, for whatever reason, are on the side of actually giving up on Jewish symbol under duress. So the fact that the Talmud tells us that only 20% left Egypt shouldn't be that surprising to us today. The second part of it is of the external part of Pharaoh, is that Pharaoh, it tells us over and over here that Pharaoh, it hardens his own heart. Now that didn't start that way. The first 5 plagues, it says that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. But at a certain point, Pharaoh himself starts hardening his own heart. And the way we explain it is that when we normalize something, it turns to it goes beyond a point where there's no return. So there will be people like Pharaoh that are anti-Semites that there's no return, there's no convincing. You can't negotiate with them. A lot of times we say, and I'm all into education and interfaith education, absolutely. But there will be people like Pharaoh, and this is a very, very important lesson here in anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism. There'll be a group of people who will never let go of that. And why is that? Because it became their identity. Their identity tells them that we're the villain, and somehow that cleanses themselves from, like, they feel moral superiority of, oh, look at these Jews, they are moneylenders, they are they're in ghettos, they have long nose, whatever they attribute to us. It becomes their modus operandi. And once that happens, they can't get rid of it because then they lose themselves. And in the story of Pharaoh, that is exactly what happens to him. His courtiers already come to him and and they say to him, why don't you let these people go? Look at what's happening to Egypt. It's destroying Egypt. Why don't you let these people go? And Pharaoh still is hardening his heart. Okay, so the three the so we talked about the external and the internal. Let's look at the plagues now, the three plagues that we're talking about. And the first one is the locust, and God says to Moses and Aaron, he said, then God said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his courtiers in order that I may display the signs among them. Actually, I think I just confused the five and the five. In the first five, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. I'm sorry, I said exactly the opposite. And then in the last five, it says that God hardens his heart because he's already there at a point where he cannot return. And that you may recount the hearing of your child and your child's child, how I made mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them. So God is now, after he sees that Pharaoh is not going to change, he's using him now as a tool to show his might. Now you can look at it also from the Jewish perspective today. Um, I know that the basis of any defense, any I'm looking for the word uh, like Tai Chi and karate. They are all Paul, help me with the word.
Martial arts.
Martial arts. So the basis for a lot of the basis for all the martial arts, which are each a tool in a toolbox, is to use the force that comes against you and turn it against them. Right? That's really kind of the basis of martial art. So God is teaching us that first we shouldn't be afraid. I mean, that's of course it's hard, but to use that force against us somehow to learn how to turn it against our enemies. I don't know if we're there, if we learn how to do that. I'm not sure. I think we need to learn how to do that, and I think Israel, the modern Israel, is maybe more of that. It has a long ways to go to convince the world that we're not the bad guy, but and kind of flip the rhetoric against our enemies, but I think the diaspora Jews have to also. I think ADL and all these those organizations, AJC and so forth. Clearly, they're not doing enough. They're missing something because anti-Semitism and bad rhetoric continues to rise. So he's going to use now Pharaoh as a tool. And Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, thus says the eternal, the Lord, God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may worship me. Again, these are the two sides that are very, very important because it's not enough to leave the anti-Semitism or to combat anti-Semitism on the outside. It's important to keep Judaism on the inside. as we began by saying, these are the two sides of the same coin. The anti-Semitism sometimes highlights our own identity. So when God says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," it's one thing. It's to battle anti-Semitism, or to get out of that. But the other side of it, so they can worship me, it means that they can to maintain Jewish identity and the mitzvot. And if you don't, I will bring the locust, and it'll consume everything that is still left from the land after the seven plagues. And as we said, it hit the water, and then the land, and then the trees, and then the animals. Um, by the way, the 10 plagues, there are three concepts of 10. There are the 10 utterances that God creates the world with, where he says, "Let there be." Then there are the 10 plagues, and then there are the 10 commandments. So the Talmud tells us, and the rabbis tell us, that these are a set of three tens that's supposed to, one, show that God created the world and he is in charge of nature. The 10 plagues is to reverse what what Pharaoh convinced his people and the world around him, that somehow he's in charge. So to show again that God is in charge, just like the ten utterances of creating the world. So returning the world to the physical reality that God is the King of the universe, the Creator, and then the Ten Commandments, of course, to solidify that again against the 10 utterances and the 10 commandments, starting by, "I am God, I created this world, and this is what I want you to do or not do." So that's kind of a side note. Then he brings the plague of the. I just want to show you the um, the verse. It says here, "They shall cover the surface of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land." Okay, so we're already starting with darkness and covering. "They shall devour the surviving remnant of that left after the hail. They shall eat away all your trees that grow in the field." And then it says that it was never a plague like this of locusts never happened before and never happened after. Um, there's actually later on in the Bible, there's another plague of locusts that was supposed to be very big and maybe even bigger than this. But the Talmud explains that it was a different locust, a different scenario. So whatever it is, this was covering everything, the land. And then Pharaoh's courtier said to him, "How long shall this one be a snare to us? Let those involved go to worship the God, their Lord. Are you not yet aware that Egypt is lost?" So I wanted to say two things about it. If we look at it in the anti-Semitism, on the anti-Semitism level, we see that every country in Jewish history, every country, every nation that either expelled their Jews or exterminated their Jews, anything like that, they destroyed themselves at the end. If you look at all the nations, from the Greek nations, the Egyptians, of course, the Greeks, the
Romans.
yeah, even before Spain, Poland. I mean, you can England. I mean, there was when England was an empire just it controlled quarter of the world, if not more, with India when it became the when Queen Victoria became the Empress of India. It controlled, I think, near the, I don't know, at least a third of this world. So, and what happened?
In 1200, they kicked the Jews out.
Yes, but then even after, right? They were still a big empire even until the beginning of the 1900s. So something happened with with anti-Semitism or the I think also what they did to Israel and this whole they created a lot of issues for the Jews in Israel, and actually the roots of the Jewish and Palestinian conflict, at least the territorial one, not necessarily the other, are the British doing. They promised the same land to both people, and even when my family left Yemen, so there's stories about the British who were also controlling part of Yemen, but controlling in other ways the rest of Yemen. Were putting hurdles in the way of the Jews to leave Yemen because they knew that they were coming to Israel. So, whatever it is, every country that ever oppressed the Jews became kind of fell from its glory eventually. So, so his courtiers are telling him, "Can't you see? Just let these people go. You hate the Jews more than you love your people." And that's always the issues. When we talk about the Palestinians, they hate the Jews more than they love their own people. If they did that, they would build hotels in Gaza and not try to dig all these tunnels. So, sorry. So that's on the external side.
Isn't that
On
what
the
Golda Meir said? Didn't she say when
Yes,
the Palestinians love their children more than they hate the Jews, we'll have peace?
yes, yes. That was one of her also one of her great phrases. So, so that's on the kind of the macro level, but there's another level that we always talk about in the context of Egypt and the letting go, and that's the personal the personal level of um, letting go of something that you know is hurting you. So certain addictions, certain people that are in your life, situations, workplace, whatever it is, there are always those situations and things that we are not able to let ourselves rid of. And that is from what we teach, what the rabbis teach, may be even worse than the external oppression. So I coined this phrase. I call it intra-Semitism. So there's anti-Semitism and intra-Semitism. What we do to ourselves sometimes is worse than what others are doing to us. Again, it's not either or. It's both. We need to battle both. But this is a very important verse in the Bible that is quoted many times and in many contexts. Can't you see that Egypt is falling apart? And then Moses is called back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is willing to at least start negotiating. And he says, "Who is going now? Tell me now who you would like to go." Meaning, you still, I'm not going to let you go completely, the whole people. You may go, the men. But Moses replied, "We will all go." regardless of our station, we will go with our sons and daughters, flocks and herds, for we must observe God's festival. Okay, this is where we see that we are already beginning the process of freedom. And this is why it's so important. Darkness and Psalm 23 is very famous for that. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. So the 20% that saw God within the darkness actually started being free in the darkness. Not even just the last plague of the firstborn and putting the blood on the doorpost. This is where it's happening. When you say to yourself internally, I am, no matter what the external environment is, internally, I know who I am. I am free already. That's the point, to free yourself. That's amazing. It's almost counterintuitive that really in that the rock bottom you feel free. But yes, that's why it's also called rock bottom, because it's then you start coming up. But in our example, what we see here is that the we will all go. Moses' reply to Pharaoh is the beginning of the freedom. I wanted to mention something here too. I've been hearing it. It's fascinating to hear the testimonials of those hostages that came back to Israel after 2 years being in the tunnels, and it's just incredible. Over and over and over again, people who were totally secular going in. They said that at the darkest times in the tunnels, that they had a couple actually said that, that when they were in a tunnel and they turned the lights off. Sometimes they had a little light or something, a lamp, and they turned the lights off. So they were in a whatever a 3 foot by 3 foot space, and in the total darkness, in the bottom of the underground, they saw God there. It's unbelievable. But this is the moment that on the national level, this is where the Jewish people are. And we know from Jewish history too, that a lot of times those situations, the dark situation where we were attacked, when we were oppressed, that actually caused us to return to ourselves and actually be stronger. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
No, that is a beautiful story. But what about all those women who were pinned down and raped, and the mothers who saw their children killed in front of them? They did not have a chance to sit in the darkness and feel God. So how do you reconcile those two?
You mean the women that were
Well, all of it.
that died after, or that's still alive? Are you talking about, because you're muted? Because many of these women,
I'm talking
unfortunately,
about, no, I'm not talking about women specifically, but just the literalization of the metaphor of being in darkness and seeing the light of God and being with God. It's a beautiful story, but what about all of those thousands of people who did not have that a communion with God, but went
Mhm.
out being raped or killed brutally in front of their families, or
Yeah.
tortured? That, what, how do you reconcile? I mean, I'm not, it
Mhm.
just, I mean, that's the quintessential question, right? That I'm sure, I mean,
Yes, and that's why I said that 80%, as the Talmud tells us, 80% did not survive the darkness. Most people could not handle this.
I'm talking about faith surviving the darkness.
States?
No. The faith.
Oh, the
Faith.
faith.
How
Right.
how do you
They
come
did not
back?
survive it. They did
Right.
not
So
survive it.
if you don't come back from the tunnel,
Right.
how do you survive the darkness of what you've seen and been through?
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
So I grew up with a number of families in my town whose parents were either in kinder transport or they were other survivors of the camps, or they were survivors of the camps. And some of them, like I said, were sent away, never saw their families again. They were sent to England from Germany. And some of them, I would say most of them, no longer practiced Judaism. They were not affiliated. They turned their back on Judaism. They lit Hanukkah candles, maybe, but they had a Christmas tree. They were not affiliated. They turned their back on their religion for a lot of different reasons. One is fear, one is disappointment. So not everybody can hold their faith.
Right. Right. And that's what I prefaced it already from the beginning, right? I said the Talmud tells us that 80% died in the darkness, meaning in this plague, that it doesn't have this effect on everybody. But I want to actually also qualify something here, because even though a lot of people left their religion or their Judaism after the Holocaust, because they really couldn't wrap this around their mind. How can, if God exists, how can God do this, right? Of course, this is the main, as this is the number one theological question in this world: why good people suffer. That's, so we know that. So, and really, I always say, sitting behind Elie Wiesel in synagogue for many years and washing the hands of the Kohanim with him on the high holidays, for me was such an amazing, gave me so much strength. My parents went through darkness too, but of course, nothing like the Holocaust. But still, from their perspective, it was a Holocaust. A lot of people died on the way, and they were robbed and abused and all that. But on a national, global level, that the what happened in Europe, and for him to sit there in synagogue and be a worshiper, a weekly a worshiper, and that to me gave me a lot of strength. Here, I'm washing the hands of the Kohanim. He was a Levi too. We were both Levites, and some holidays we were just the two of us washing the hands of the Kohanim, and no talking. I don't think I've exchanged 5 words with him in like 12 years, because there was nothing to talk about, and it was beyond words, really. So it was you're here, you're still attached to your faith, and you can see beyond that. And of course, one of his books that he describes, of course, everything, and it's called Night. That his central book about the Holocaust is called Night, because this is exactly what we're talking about. It happens at night. And those people who even left their religion, this is the nuance that I want to remind ourselves here. They may not have left God. They may have now a different conversation with God, and they're angry at God, and they're rebellious against God, but they're still having a conversation with God. So I would say that 80% who were left in Egypt may not necessarily have lost their God, but they, like you said, they now the conversation shifted, and at the end they didn't want to put the blood on the doorpost. And this is what I'm trying to get to now quickly through the two other plagues, and to get to the blood on the doorpost, because that is something that is the key to battling both external and internal anti-Semitism or intra-Semitism.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
How is the Egyptian Jews that were expelled after the establishment of Israel, were those continuously living Egyptian Jews that had kept their faith throughout without leaving?
No. No, these were not the ancient Jews. They've been to no, there's some communities in Egypt that were there for several hundred years, but they're not from the ancient Egypt. We don't trace them to that. Um, so okay, so then the second of the three last plagues is the darkness, and it says in the darkness, I'll just highlight one phrase there. It says, Moses said, that says the God, towards midnight, I will go forth among the Egyptians. Um, sorry, I will, and God said, I will bring, sorry, here it says people could not see one another, and for 3 days no one could move about, but all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwellings. Okay, so it says all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwelling, but the Egyptians could not see each other. It was this thick darkness that was not just that the Talmud tells us, and this is very important. It wasn't just the void of light. It was its own thing. It was such a thick darkness that it was its own creation. So they couldn't see each other for 3 days. And that is the key to also, when we battle anti-Semitism, is not to bundle, is to really cause the all the factions that are trying to oppress us not to see each other. It's yes, in a sense, it's flipping the power of divide and conquer. So it's to, and it gives us a clue at least of how we can start battling something that is amorphic. We can see that everybody hates Jews. No, not everybody hates Jews, and not everybody hates Jews the same way, and for the right reasons, for the same reasons. Some are just ignorant, and they should be taught. Again, some will never let go, but there are many shades in between, and maybe the ADL and all the other organizations that engage in advocacy should really look at that, at the nuances, and not just release blanket statements against the whole world that hates Judaism. As somebody who deals with interfaith for a long time, there's definitely different shades out there. Okay, and then the last plague is the death of the firstborn. And God said to Moses, I will bring but one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. After that, he shall let you go from there, meaning he's even going to want you to go, not just hold you back. But it says here, and then of course in midnight, every firstborn is going to die. Every first issue of the womb. So if somebody has two wives, the firstborn of each wife will die, and the animals. So everybody in Egypt, from the king to the maidservant, everybody will have death in their homes. And then God gives the Israelites a mechanism to battle this, meaning there'll be a storm. So everybody's going to be under the storm. The storm that we're waiting for tomorrow is going to hit everybody. The people that will be less affected are the people who protect themselves from it, not people who wouldn't be in the vicinity of the storm. So God says, I'm bringing a storm. I'm giving you the mechanism to hold yourself against it. And what is this mechanism? You will have to speak to the whole community of Israel and say to them, on the 10th of this month, each family take itself a lamb and hold it in the household. This is very important. It's part of the being free while still under oppression, which is this is a concept that the Torah teaches us, that your freedom doesn't start when you leave. Your freedom starts before. So you take the lamb and you hold it for 4 days, meaning it's not just about taking something in a dark alley and slaughtering. This is an Egyptian symbol. So you're showing the Egyptians and to yourself that you are no longer under its thumb. And then after 4 days, you slaughter it, and you take the blood with a hyssop and you put it on the mantle and the 2 doorposts. And in order for God, and that blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So we will kind of just wrap this now with this idea. The blood is the covenant. The Torah tells us there are 2 types of blood that we show God the covenant, is the blood on the doorpost and the blood of the circumcision. But the blood on the doorpost even preceded the circumcision, because they only circumcised themselves after they left, because all those years in Egypt, they were restricted. They couldn't circumcise themselves. So there was something about the blood that is a symbol here that tells God that we're in this. So this is very interesting, because the Jews are not perfect, and we do things that we also deserve to die, so to speak. But God gives us an option. He says, you can die this way, or to shed your blood that way. But if you are willing to shed your blood that way, through the circumcision, or through the brit, through the covenant, that will protect you. It'll be like somebody giving charity that will save you from death. Charity saves from death. There's a whole discussion in the tractate of Shabbat in the Talmud, how people were saved because they were giving tzedakah, they were giving charity, that they were supposed to die, and that saved them because they were charitable. So the covenant, the brit, is how God overturns our rule, the ruling of the judgment. So this is where the most important thing, and if we bring it to our own lives today, or any oppression in history and anti-Semitism, is, yes, some people are going to die either way, but you can die that way, or you can at least say, I'm going to hold on to what is my identity, and God will see this and will save me. And that's how we started. Just to wrap this whole thing, we started by saying that God saved the Jewish people because they kept those three identification: their clothing, their names, and their language. So that brit, that blood that we put on the doorpost, of course, that became the mezuzah, that to show I am not afraid I can be afraid, but either way, I'm going to hold on to my identity and that faith that I may die one way, but I'm going to take my chances that God is going to pass over me or protect me from this storm because I was willing to hold on to the horns of the altar. That is the ways that we can battle anti-Semitism from outside and on the inside.